Burton to say, get to the top, I'm too tired to ride.
Did you know that one of rock's greatest guitarists may have been murdered and the mystery remains unsolved? Today, we're diving into the tragic and mysterious ends of rock legends whose stories will shock you. 30. Eddie Cochran. Eddie Cochran lived fast and knew his time was short. His biggest fear? That he'd be the next rock casualty. Eddie Cochran was part of the first wave of rock and roll stars along with the three musicians who passed. His songs, Summertime Blues and 20 Flight Rock, became early classics in the young genre and very popular among his teenage fan base. His appearance in films such as The Girl Can't Help It and Go Johnny Go helped his popularity grow further. According to John Collis's biography, Gene Vincent and Eddie Cochran, people close to Cochran said he became obsessed with his own death, believing it was around the corner after the deaths of Holly Valens and the Big Bopper. While touring in the United Kingdom in 1960 with fellow musician Gene Vincent, Cochran's premonition came true. Following a performance on Saturday, April 16th, Vincent, Cochran, and others were involved in a single-car accident. Cochran died the next day, Easter Sunday, at the age of 21. He was the only one killed in the crash. 29. John Bonham. He lived with reckless abandon just like he drummed, but no one expected that his endless partying would take his life. Led Zeppelin drummer Bonham shared the basic life philosophy of Keith Moon. Play the drums with reckless, wild abandon and live your life the same way. The huge success of Led Zeppelin throughout the 1970s gave him endless opportunities to party and consume just about every illicit substance ever created, but he simply couldn't carry on like that without facing a horrible consequence. The inevitable occurred on September 25, 1980, when he consumed somewhere in the vicinity of 40 shots of vodka over the course of just 24 hours as Zeppelin was preparing for an American tour. He was found dead in his bed the following morning. John had this amazing technique, Jimmy Page told Rolling Stone in 2007, but he also had the imagination to go with it. You hear the pattern he comes up with in Good Times, Bad Times. That still perplexes drummers. Nobody else can do that. Nobody else had that imagination. 28. Jim Morrison.
Must have whiskey, oh, you know why. Oh,
He was a poetic wild child, but his chaotic lifestyle ultimately caught up with him. His final moments remain shrouded in mystery. By the time the Doors released their fourth album, drugs and alcohol were taking their toll on Morrison. His performances were affected, and he was unreliable, missing sessions in the recording studio. He was found in a bathtub at his apartment at 17 Rue Beautreillis by his girlfriend Pamela Corson. No autopsy was performed on the body of Jim Morrison, nor was there much of an examination. The story told by his girlfriend changed on every telling, and rumors still exist today as to how he died. 27. Jimi Hendrix. An iconic guitarist, Hendrix's life was as electric as his music, but the true cause of his death remains debated to this day. Jimi Hendrix was one of the greatest guitar players in the world. Sadly, his life was cut short when he died in London from a drug overdose. The official version of Hendrix's death at the age of 27 is that he died from choking on vomit after a drug overdose. James Tappy Wright, a 65-year-old former road manager who worked for Hendrix's manager Mike Jeffrey, stated that Hendrix was killed on the orders of Jeffrey by a gang who broke into his hotel room and forced wine and painkillers down his throat until he drowned. Some skeptical fans believe he died from having sex with his girlfriend and had a heart attack. I guess we'll never know the real story. 26. Ian Curtis. Despite rising fame, Ian Curtis was haunted by inner demons that no one could see. His tragic end came too soon. Joy Division was just beginning to gain recognition as a groundbreaking post-punk act in the spring of 1980, but to its frontman, the growing acclaim was meaningless. Curtis, a deep baritone singer who infused nearly every Joy Division song with intense sorrow, emptiness, and longing, suffered from severe depression and epilepsy, sometimes having seizures on stage at a time when treatment options for both afflictions were minimally effective. He was also consumed by the guilt he felt over cheating on his wife and mother of their newborn daughter with a Belgian journalist. He poured all his pain into the lyrics of one of his final songs, Love Will Tear Us Apart. Weeks before it came out, he hanged himself in his kitchen while listening to Iggy Pop's The Idiot. His surviving bandmates carried on as New Order, but never got over the horrific loss. He was his own worst enemy, Joy Division bassist Peter Hook told Rolling Stone in 2013. The doctor said to him when he was diagnosed with epilepsy, "If you live a quiet life, no loud noises, no alcohol, you should be okay." Being in a group does not let you do any of those, and he didn't want to give the group up. 25. Dwayne Alman. The guitar wizard of the Allman Brothers, Dwayne's life ended in a split-second accident. His legacy, though, lives on. The Allman Brothers band's strength and leader was their guitarist, Dwayne Alman. Alman had spent the mid to late 1960s as a must-have studio guitarist, working with artists such as Aretha Franklin, Wilson Pickett, and fellow guitar god Eric Clapton. On October 29, 1971, Alman was driving his motorcycle through Macon, Georgia, when he hit a stopped truck. His bike jumped in the air and landed on him, causing internal injuries. Though still conscious when he was taken to the hospital, the guitarist died hours later from his injuries. As the band continued without their leader, tragedy struck again. On November 11, 1972, bassist Barry Oakley hit a bus on his own motorcycle and died from cerebral swelling. The accident took place a few blocks from Alman's fatal crash. Both men were 24 and are buried next to each other at Rose Hill Cemetery in Macon, Georgia. 24. Jerry Garcia. The Grateful Dead's heartbeat, Jerry, struggled with addiction his entire life. In the end, it was too much for even him to survive. Garcia was supposed to grow into his famous caricature on the cover of Old and in the Way, sitting on a barrel picking a banjo with his pals, when he wasn't spearheading the collectivist spacecraft known as the Grateful Dead with his lazy laser beam guitar leads and cosmic Americana lyrics. One of the greatest songwriters and soloists in rock history, Garcia was the Dead's fulcrum and focal point. Overzealous Deadheads projected the role of guru onto him, a role he completely rejected but could never quite shake. His death had roots in his heroin habit, begun from smoking the drug in the 70s, under the impression it was Persian opium. It progressed to a full-on addiction, triggering a downward health spiral exacerbated by diabetes, sleep apnea, cigarette smoking, other drug use, and a toxic diet consisting mainly of meat and ice cream. After collapsing in 1986 and literally returning from the dead, he cleaned up, and the band's popularity hit a new level. But fame dogged him, he backslid, and old habits returned. Garcia died in the summer of 1995 of cardiac arrest during an attempt at rehab. 23. Randy Rhodes. Randy Rhodes feared flying, yet fate led him to a fatal plane crash. His death left a void in rock history. One of rock's enduring mysteries unfolded on March 19, 1982, as 25-year-old Ozzy Osbourne guitarist Randy Rhodes, despite having a reported fear of flying, perished in a fiery crash at Leesburg, Florida after a joyride in a Beechcraft Bonanza. When it was over, the Dead included Rhodes, one of the era's most promising young guitarists, as well as Rachel Youngblood, a 58-year-old seamstress and cook for the Osbourne band, and Andrew Aycock, a 36-year-old bus driver with an expired pilot's license. Aycock made as many as 3 passes over the home, apparently in a joyriding attempt to buzz over the other band members. On the final pass, the plane clipped the tour bus, spun out of control, hit a nearby pine tree, and then nosedived into the house. The ensuing fireball killed all 3 passengers who were left unrecognizable by the flames. Rhodes had to be identified by his jewelry. 22. Janis Joplin. Known for her raw, soulful voice, Janis Joplin's vibrant life ended in heartbreak. She joined the notorious 27 Club. Janis Joplin was one of the most distinctive voices of the late 1960s, leaving a lasting impact on both rock and blues music. Known for her raw, raspy vocals, Joplin brought an electrifying presence to the stage, pouring her heart into every performance. She rose to fame with hits like Piece of My Heart and Me and Bobby McGee, quickly becoming one of the most beloved and influential female rock stars of her time. However, behind her performances, Joplin battled inner demons, including severe loneliness and struggles with addiction. She was often open about her sense of isolation, once stating that she felt terribly, terribly alone despite her fame. Joplin's intense lifestyle, fueled by drugs and alcohol, only deepened these struggles. On October 4th, 1970, the world was shocked to learn that Joplin had been found dead in her hotel room in Los Angeles. At just 27 years old, she had joined the infamous 27 Club, a term coined for rock legends who died at that same age. The official cause of death was a heroin overdose, a tragic and all too common end for many musicians of her era. Her death came just 2 weeks after fellow rock icon Jimi Hendrix passed away, adding to the sense of collective grief within the music community. 21. Bob Marley. With global fame, Marley's spirit seemed invincible, but his life was cut short by a rare form of cancer. With his Wailers, Marley blended reggae, ska, and rocksteady and redefined this genre of music. As a songwriter, Marley gained fame after Eric Clapton covered I Shot the Sheriff. With his trademark dreadlocks and spirituality in his music, Marley remains an iconic Rastafari figure 40 years after his death. In 1977, Marley was diagnosed with a rare type of melanoma unrelated to sun exposure. The lesion was under a toenail, and he was advised to have the toe amputated, but he opted to have the nail and nail bed removed instead. Although he continued to record and tour, his health declined, and it was determined that the cancer had spread. Despite months of various treatments, he died in Miami at the age of 36. 20. Cass Elliott. Cass Elliott captured hearts with her voice, but her life ended in controversy and rumors. The truth of her death is heartbreaking. Mama Cass Elliott's weight followed her throughout her life and death. As part of the folk pop group The Mamas and the Papas, Cass Elliott became a household name. However, her weight almost kept her out of the band since John Phillips didn't want to put Cass in the band because of it. After the Mamas and the Papas ended, Cass maintained a steady career in music and television. On July 29, 1974, she passed away from a heart attack in Mayfair, London, at 32 years old. Even in death, Elliott's weight was still the story. A rumor spread that she died choking on a ham sandwich. Many publications, such as Time, ran with the now debunked ham sandwich story. 19. Stevie Ray Vaughan. Stevie Ray Vaughan's talent was larger than life, but his time on Earth was cut tragically short in a helicopter crash. Vaughan was a music legend to other legends. Throughout the 1980s, he released 4 studio albums with his band Double Trouble. His guitar abilities placed him number 12 on Rolling Stone's list of the 100 greatest guitarists, and Vaughan is credited for helping to repopularize blues music during the decade. Unfortunately, during the early morning of August 27, 1990, his career came to an abrupt end. According to Guitar World, Double Trouble had done 2 shows with fellow blues guitarists Eric Clapton, Buddy Guy, Robert Cray, and Stevie's older brother Jimmy Vaughan in East Troy, Wisconsin. Vaughan then boarded a helicopter to fly back to Chicago, but it crashed, killing all 4 people on board as well as the pilot. Stevie Ray was 35 years old. 18. Bon Scott. AC/DC's wild frontman lived on the edge, but his night of heavy drinking led to a tragic end in a parked car. On February 19, 1980, Bon Scott was found dead. The legendary AC/DC frontman had been out drinking with friends, but the casual evening took a terrible turn as Scott passed out in his car and ultimately choked to death on his own vomit. He was only 33 years old. For us, it was like losing a member of your family, guitarist Angus Young said in a subsequent interview. It's very, very difficult to go through something like that. Not only is it your friend, it's also somebody you've been working with all that time. 17. Amy Weinhouse. Amy Winehouse's soulful voice captured the world, yet her struggles with addiction made headlines until her tragic passing at just 27. A throwback to another era, Winehouse's eclectic mix of soul, jazz, and R&B, along with her distinctive look, made her one of the most successful singers and songwriters of her time. In 2008, she became one of the few female artists to win 5 Grammys in a single night, and the first British woman to do so. Unfortunately, she was plagued by substance abuse, including heavy drinking and drug use, as well as mental illness that led to eating disorders, depression, self-harm, and physical attacks on others, resulting in numerous arrests. Although she did receive medical help throughout her short life, she succumbed to alcohol poisoning at the age of 27. 16. Ronnie VanZant. Ronnie's rugged southern rock voice defined Lynyrd Skynyrd, but a tragic plane crash silenced him forever. As lead singer of Lynyrd Skynyrd, VanZant fronted one of the most popular and influential southern rock bands of the 1970s, known for hits like Sweet Home Alabama and Freebird. At the height of their fame, the band was traveling from one venue to another by plane, which ran out of fuel and crash-landed in Gillsburg, Mississippi. VanZant was thrown from the plane and died on impact from head injuries. Many later claimed that VanZant often said he wouldn't live to 30. He was less than 3 months away from that milestone. 15. Keith Moon. Keith Moon's antics on and off the stage made him a rock legend, but they also led to his tragic end. No rock musician lived life to the fullest more so than Keith Moon. His chaotic drumming made him a legend, placing him second on Rolling Stone's list of the 100 greatest drummers. Moon was the driving force behind one of the greatest bands of the era. Moon helped create many of the stereotypes that still exist in rock and roll, like smashing hotel rooms and his own instrument, outrageous spending, and frequent alcohol and drug use that usually landed him in trouble. Moon's predictable demise finally came on September 7, 1978, at the age of 32 from an overdose of heminevrin. He died at the same age and in the same place where Mama Cass died 4 years prior. 14. Kirsty McCall. Kirsty McCall saved her son's life but lost her own in a tragic boating accident that shocked the music world. Though mostly known in the United States for a single song, Kirsty McCall was regarded as one of the finest artists of her generation in the United Kingdom. The BBC reported that U2 frontman Bono called McCall the Noel Coward of her generation, and Johnny Marr of the Smiths said she had the wit of Ray Davies and the harmonic invention of the Beach Boys. On December 18, 2000, the 41-year-old singer and her 2 sons were swimming in Cozumel, Mexico, when a speedboat illegally entered the area they were in. She moved one of her sons out of the way of the boat, but was struck and killed instantly. Kirsty's mother, Jean McCall, launched the website justiceforkirsty.org, believing that the Mexican government hadn't been forthcoming throughout the investigation. The boat was owned by businessman Carlos Gonzalez Nova, who was on the boat. Deckhand Jose Sen Yam was found guilty of culpable homicide. although according to Kirsty's biography written by Jean McCall, Yam's wife and father-in-law both said he was not the driver. 13. Joey Ramone. Joey Ramone gave punk rock its heart and soul, but his sudden death left fans devastated. Jeff Hyman fronted the Bronx, New York punk rock group The Ramones. He was an excellent singer with a lot of range and diversity, often described as the Jim Morrison of punk rock. Johnny, Dee Dee, and Joey Ramone were the only original members of the band to have been with the band to the end. Joey died suddenly of lymphoma in 2000 in New York. New York City dedicated a Midtown street after Joey called Joey Ramone's Place. 12. Kurt Cobain. As the voice of a generation, Kurt Cobain's battle with inner demons ended in the most tragic way imaginable. As lead singer and primary songwriter for Nirvana, Cobain is one of the most influential artists of the Seattle grunge movement, making Nirvana one of the best-selling groups of all time. However, an unstable home life, a family history of suicide and mental illness, and health problems including chronic bronchitis and an undiagnosed stomach condition led to extensive drug use beginning at age 13. Shortly after a stint in rehab, Cobain was found dead in his home from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Although conspiracy theories have floated that he was murdered, it was officially ruled that he died by suicide at the age of 27. 11. Buddy Holly. He was a pioneer of rock and roll, and his untimely death in a plane crash shocked fans around the world. One of the earliest and most influential rock and roll pioneers, Holly is credited with popularizing the use of two guitars, bass, and drums by rock bands, experimenting with double tracking, and writing a huge catalog of songs that helped shape the genre, including That'll Be the Day and It's So Easy. During this same time, teenager Richie Valens was pioneering the Spanish-speaking rock and roll movement with songs like La Bamba, inspiring Latino musicians. He is considered the first Latino to find success in mainstream rock and roll. J.P. the Big Bopper Richardson was also gaining popularity as a songwriter and guitarist who wrote George Jones's first #1 country hit, White Lightning, and as a performer known for his humor with such hits as Chantilly Lace. All three artists, along with the group Dion and the Belmonts, formed a 24-day, 24-city winter dance party tour through the Midwest. For the tour, they used buses that were breaking down in wintry conditions, with travel often lasting most of a day due to poor scheduling. Holly chartered a small plane that would carry him, Valens, and Richardson to the next venue. The pilot and all three artists were killed shortly after takeoff when the plane crashed into a nearby cornfield. Holly was 22, Richardson was 28, and Valens was only 17. 10. Keith Relf. The Yardbirds' lead singer left a mark on rock history, but his shocking death is one fans rarely forget. It is understandable to forget about a band's frontman when the lineup also featured a young Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and pre-Led Zeppelin Jimmy Page during its run. That's what has happened to Keith Relf of the Yardbirds. After the Yardbirds fell apart in 1968, Relf continued his music career with various bands, as his more well-known bandmates achieved greater commercial and critical success throughout the 1970s. According to Ultimate Classic Rock, on May 14, 1976, while playing an electric guitar in his basement, Relf accidentally electrocuted himself, ending his life. He was 33 years old. 9. Dimebag Darrell. A heavy metal legend, his life ended in a shocking act of violence that rocked the music world to its core. While performing with his new band, Damage Plan, Darrell Abbott, known as Dimebag Darrell, was shot during his band's set. He was 38 years old. In 1981, Darrell helped form the heavy metal band Pantera, and his guitar riffs helped drive the band to success until they split in 2003. Pantera reshaped the metal genre over their 2-decade run. Pantera's drummer, Darrell's older brother, Vinnie Paul Abbott, said of the band in an interview with Rolling Stone in 1992, "We pulled the very best out of each one of ourselves, and with each record that we made, that mountain got taller and taller to climb." 8. Freddy Mercury. Freddie Mercury's incredible voice thrilled millions, but his untimely death from AIDS left the world mourning a true icon. Freddie Mercury, the charismatic frontman of Queen, was known for his extraordinary vocal range and flamboyant stage presence. Queen's sound was unlike anything else at the time, combining elements of hard rock, pop, cabaret, and even opera. With hits like Bohemian Rhapsody, Somebody to Love, and We Are the Champions, the band quickly became a global phenomenon. Mercury's unique ability to switch between powerful anthems and tender ballads made him a standout talent in the music world, while his theatrical performances captivated millions. However, behind the bold persona was a man who fiercely guarded his privacy. In the late 1980s, rumors began circulating about Mercury's health as he noticeably withdrew from public appearances. Despite his declining health, he continued to work tirelessly with Queen, recording what would become his final album with the band, Innuendo, released in 1991. It wasn't until November 23, 1991 that Mercury confirmed the suspicions, publicly announcing that he was battling AIDS. Tragically, just a day later, he passed away at the age of 44 due to complications related to the illness. His death shocked the world and marked the loss of one of rock's most innovative and beloved figures. 7. Brian Jones. As a founding member of the Rolling Stones, Brian Jones helped shape rock history until his mysterious death shocked the world. The Rolling Stones would never have existed were it not for the efforts of original guitarist Brian Jones. He formed the initial incarnation of the group when he took out an ad in a May 1962 issue of Jazz News seeking bandmates, and even named the fledgling group after the Muddy Waters song Rollin' Stone Blues. His love of American R&B music was critical to the group's early sound. However, once Mick Jagger formed a songwriting partnership with Keith Richards and the group transitioned to original material, his power in the band dramatically receded. It receded further when a growing drug addiction made him extremely unreliable, eventually causing the group to sack him in the summer of 1969. Weeks later, he was discovered at the bottom of his swimming pool in Sussex, England. To this day, some people suspect foul play was involved, but most of the evidence confirms the coroner's report, which famously read, "Death by misadventure." He had a huge contribution in the early days, Jagger told Rolling Stone in 1995. He was very obsessed with it, which you always need. He killed himself, but he should have been playing trad jazz weekends and teaching in school. He probably would have been better off. 6. Mark Bolan. T-Rex's frontman was a glam rock pioneer, but his life was tragically cut short by a fatal car crash. Rock pioneer Bolan helped shape glam as we knew it, paving the way for artists like David Bowie with his band T-Rex's spacey sound, mystical lyrics, and gender-bending style. Bolan symbolized the evolution of rock subculture in the 70s, and T-Rex found success with albums like Electric Warrior. "What I saw in Mark was raw talent," producer Tony Visconti reflected in a Guardian interview. "I saw a potential rock star in Mark, right from the minute I met him. Though his band and music career fell off in the mid-70s, Bolan found a new calling as the host of the 1977 series Mark, where he performed and brought on a mixture of new and established musicians to join him. A week after the final episode, which featured Bowie and Bolan singing Heroes together, and 2 weeks before his 30th birthday, Bolan's wife Gloria Jones lost control of their vehicle in a crash that killed the singer instantly. 5. Richard Manuel. The band's soulful singer battled addiction and depression, and in the end, it all became too much for him to bear. Musician Taj Mahal said of the band in the documentary Once We Were Brothers, Robbie Robertson and the Band, quote, "If there were any American musicians that were comparable to what the Beatles were, it would have been them, end quote. The band featured drummer Levon Helm, bassist Rick Danko, and de facto lead vocalist and multi-instrumentalist Richard Manuel, known for having a very soulful voice and the ability to sing in falsetto. Helm said of Manuel, he was about the best singer I'd ever heard. Danko called Manuel a force of nature in the band. Despite his immense talent, according to AllMusic, Manuel struggled throughout his life with alcohol and drug addiction. On the early morning of March 4th, 1986, following a show at Winter Park, Florida, Manuel committed suicide. For years, Manuel had struggled with drug and alcohol addiction as well as depression following the death of manager and mentor Albert Grossman earlier in the year. Manuel was 42 years old at the time of his death. 4. Cliff Burton. A tragic accident ended Metallica bassist Cliff Burton's life just as his star was on the rise. His bandmates were left devastated. On the night of September 26, 1986, Metallica was traveling between tour dates in Sweden when Burton and guitarist Kirk Hammett drew cards to decide who would get to choose a bunk. The bassist drew the ace of spades and chose the bunk Hammett had been occupying. I said, "Fine, take my bunk," the guitarist recalled in VH1's Behind the Music. "I'll sleep up front. It's probably better anyway." The bus left the road and flipped over on its side, and Burton, who had been asleep in the preferred top bunk, was thrown through the window. As the bus came down, it landed on top of the 24-year-old musician. Reportedly, attempts were made to rescue him from underneath the bus by lifting it with a crane, but the crane slipped, and the bus crashed down on top of Burton a second time. Band members and onlookers have given different accounts of whether Burton died upon the first impact or when the bus came down again, but the promising young star died at the scene. 3. Elvis Presley.
I did it my way.
The king of rock and roll met an untimely end that left the world in mourning and fans in disbelief. Elvis Presley was a cultural phenomenon, revolutionizing music and popular culture with his unmistakable voice, charismatic performances, and timeless style. Rising to fame in the 1950s, Elvis broke barriers and became a global icon with hits like Jailhouse Rock, Heartbreak Hotel, and Can't Help Falling in Love. His unique blend of rock, gospel, and rhythm and blues created a sound that resonated across generations, earning him the title, the King of Rock and Roll. Beyond music, Elvis made his mark on the big screen with numerous films and became one of the most recognizable faces in the world. But as his career soared, Elvis struggled with personal demons. By the 1970s, he had developed a dependence on prescription medications, which took a toll on his health. His grueling tour schedules and intense lifestyle exacerbated these issues, and fans grew increasingly concerned about his well-being. On August 16, 1977, the world was stunned by the news of Elvis's sudden death. He was found unresponsive in the bathroom of his Graceland home in Memphis, Tennessee. The cause was later determined to be a heart attack brought on by an accidental overdose of prescription drugs, including painkillers, anti-anxiety medications, and sleeping pills. Elvis was just 42 years old. Elvis fans believe to this day that he walks among us, but usually it's just a guy in an Elvis jumpsuit. 2. Ricky Nelson. From teen heartthrob to music icon, Ricky Nelson's life was tragically cut short by a plane crash that stunned fans worldwide. With a popularity that rivaled Elvis's, Nelson first found fame as part of his parents' sitcom The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, and used that series to help launch his music career. His Poor Little Fool was the very first #1 hit on Billboard's Top 100, and he eventually charted 63 songs on the legendary pop chart. His career eventually waned, but in 1985 he embarked on a comeback tour and bought a private plane for traveling. The plane, which had experienced ongoing mechanical issues, crash landed, reportedly due to a fire from a faulty heater. Nelson and 6 passengers, including his girlfriend, were killed while the 2 pilots were able to escape. 1. John Lennon. The world lost a musical visionary when John Lennon was gunned down in New York City. His death still haunts us today. John Lennon was originally with the Beatles but went on to become one of the biggest names in music ever. An amazing singer and songwriter, he wrote famous anthems like Give Peace a Chance and Imagine. On December 8, 1980, John Lennon was gunned down in New York City while standing in front of the hotel. It was a senseless death caused by an even more senseless reason. The shooter, one Mark David Chapman, was an obsessed fan. Not surprisingly, he was sent to prison and remains there to this day. The promising young star died at the scene. Thanks for watching. If you found these stories fascinating, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Check out our other videos for more tales of rock legends and their unforgettable journeys. Catch you in the next one.